when you come to this area, you always wanted to say hi and say thank to the Creator for, giving us the opportunity to come down and fish for your people and to have this land still.
Just before summer's end, the Karuk people make a journey to the center of the world by following the fish-filled waters of the Klamath River.
Creator has made it to where these fish show up at this time to feed the people up here doing ceremony. It's like a perfect balance. You kind of corral the fish, spook them in the net, and you got to turn it over. And when you turn it over, it locks them in the net.
It's here at Ishi-Pishi Falls where the Creator slows the fall run salmon just long enough for Kenneth Brink and the Karuk tribe to celebrate the World Renewal Ceremony.
And everybody that is involved with the ceremonies of fish, we find our identity again. We find our spirituality, we find ourselves.
The word Karuk means people upriver, and for generations, they've been perfecting the skill of jumping rocks and balancing on wood planks to fish some of the most turbulent waters in the Klamath. Today, they're one of the last tribes in California to actively fish with traditional dip net poles.
By way of ceremonies and creation stories. So that's what kind of keeps us here, and these poles right here have not changed.
Ronald Reed Sr. has fished more World Renewal ceremonies than he can count. But this ceremony, in August of 2024, is one he'll never forget.
Coinciding with the World Renewal ceremony is dam removal on the Klamath River.
Undam the Klamath!
Bring the salmon home!
Woo!
That this day was inevitable, because without this day, there's no future for our people.
On August 28, 2024, tribes along the Klamath River watched as construction crews broke through the fourth and final dam set for removal. For the first time in over 100 years, salmon can now swim freely through 400 miles of their native habitat.
Right now, it just feels like all of the salmon, they can feel it. They know they're going to be able to come back home.
Leif and Lisa Hillman are among the many Indigenous people who spent the past 20 years fighting to remove 4 dams responsible for harmful algae blooms and fish kills downstream.
Our cultures, our communities, and our people have really been devastated by these dams. This right here today is, we can look toward the future, because we have a future.
Behind the dam lies a century's worth of sediment buildup, over 17 million cubic yards, enough to fill more than 1,500 Olympic-sized pools. Since the dam's deconstruction began over 8 months ago, the release of sediment has lowered the oxygen levels in the Klamath River, killing aquatic life and harming wildlife along the riverbanks. Government regulators anticipated and prepared for these short-term deaths due to the sediment, but from the tribe's perspective, the muddy water is just a temporary setback that will lead to long-term benefits.
I've been hearing people, complain about, all the sediment in the river,
It's brown.
It's brown. I tell you what, all this summer, there's been sediment in the river, but when you get in that river, it feels good.
Not everyone agrees that what's happening in the water feels good.
We're the Indigenous here. We live here. I mean, we know a lot about this land, and we could have added a lot of value to this operation.
Horse rancher William Simpson is a regular contributor to Siskiyou News, the area's local newspaper.
I don't like it when the American people are misled.
Simpson wrote several articles about how regulators ignored the knowledge of locals and ignored previous research on toxins in the sediment behind the dams.
Right behind me, we have Angus cattle that are grazing the grass and the brush that was planted in the sediment. They're accumulating whatever's in those sediments into their bodies, and CDM Smith says there's toxins. Not me, CDM Smith, a very capable laboratory out of Sacramento.
CDM Smith is the lab research group that federal regulators brought in to analyze the sediment behind the dams. In 2011, they published a multi-year study that looked at potential toxins in the sediment and suggested options of handling it.
CDM Smith said, we need to remove the sediments. It's 400 million. They were gonna dredge them out and then let the lakes down over a long period of time, many months, several months at least. That would minimize sediment. Most of the sediment comes out.
Declare a state of emergency.
It's time to take action. Talking isn't going to cut it anymore.
Simpson regularly cites data from the CDM Smith study and highlights the toxins that researchers discovered. Because of Simpson's articles, fear of harmful toxins have helped fuel local residents to protest the dam's removal.
So if you take something out of context, you can create fear. You can tell people, oh, this is toxic, and it can create fear in people.
CDM Smith declined to talk to us about their 2011 sediment reports. So we took those reports to independent water experts Olu Jegede, a UC Davis assistant professor of toxicology, and Timothy Horner, a retired geology professor from Sacramento State.
As far as human risk goes, it's very, very low.
When it comes to toxins, the CDM Smith report only identifies trace amounts of harmful metals. And according to Assistant Professor Olu Jegede, those trace amounts are likely what William Smith is writing about.
They did the analysis, I saw it. So it's just maybe 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 15.
In the long term, is the sediment, according to these reports here, would it be harmful to people?
No. In the long term, no.
From a toxicology perspective, Olu Jegede also says the trace toxins in the sediment has a low chance of hurting or bioaccumulating in animals above or below the water.
It's very possible that you can misinterpret the report. Yeah. And they just pick on those areas you want people to see.
As for the sediment's short-term effect on salmon, that's a bit of a different story.
The sediment is too fine for the salmon. They need sand and gravel where they lay their eggs, and that muddy stuff just doesn't work for them.
The coffee-colored clay-filled water reduces oxygen and temporarily killed aquatic life during the dam removals. The CDM Smith report looked at several options to prevent the sediment from going downriver. One option was to dredge the sediment out of the reservoir and truck it away before the dam removal.
The local people would have been in a lot worse shape with all those dump trucks. It wasn't an ideal place to put the sediment. I mean, there was really no way to do that practically in those areas.
Instead of dredging and trucking away the harmful sediment, government regulators decided to blast holes in the dams and let the flow of the river water carry a majority of the sediment out to the ocean, leaving a smaller amount on the banks.
It looks pretty bad right now if you live there. But the good news is, if we get a wet winter this year, a lot of it will flush out. If we get a couple more wet winters after that, it'll probably be fairly clear by the time we go a couple years.
About 560 miles north of the Klamath River in Washington State is the Elwha River.
Well, our name, Klallam, means strong people, but we have 30 villages up and down the Strait of Juan de Fuca, including Vancouver Island in Canada. So our presence has been here for millennia.
In 2014, this was the site of the largest dam removal project in the country.
There was many times to where ourselves in our previous councils had really thought that it would be something that didn't happen in my generation.
The river runs through the ancestral lands of the Elwha Klallam tribe, and for over 100 years, 2 outdated hydroelectric dams block salmon from swimming upriver and spawning in what is now Olympic National Park.
And we could see fish down there bumping up against the wall of the dam.
Much like tribes on the Klamath River, Russell Hepner and Francis Charles are among the many tribal members who fought and successfully removed dams on the Elwha River.
We did it with a lot of determination. We're a small tribe. So I guess my parting words would be, we're not damned Indians anymore. We're damn proud of it, and we got our damn fish back. And if you keep working hard, so will you.
Though the Elwha is about 190 miles shorter than the Klamath River, both rivers have similar stories.
They were built illegally. The Elwha Dam was built without fish ladders,
including problems with sediment behind the dams.
24 million cubic yards of sediment. It could have filled 8 Safeco fields.
Paul Gottlieb is a retired journalist from the Peninsula Daily News. He covered the dam removal on the Elwha River extensively. The removal process began in 2011 and took 3 years to complete.
The impact of the sediment was devastating on the existing salmon and invertebrates who lived. There was a 90 to 95% mortality of all living creatures in the river when those dams were released.
Paul says the sediment caused a slew of problems, including damaging the municipal water treatment plant in the nearby town of Port Angeles. Lawsuits were filed, people protested over the fishing bans, and some rural residents complained that their wells were going dry.
It took 8 years for the river to finally reach normal turbidity. 8 years.
The removal of the dams on the Elwha was a regular headline in the paper, but just like the sediment in the river, those headlines dissipated over time.
You don't hear a lot about people upset. They're just waiting for the fish to come back.
The Elwha is an example of what can happen 10 years after dams are removed.
These are my favorite to catch in the ocean.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Mike McHenry is the Elwha-Kalalam tribe's fish habitat manager. It's his job to monitor the recovery efforts.
The way I like to look at it is, yeah, the dams were removed by 2014, but guess what? The river didn't really stabilize till 2018, 2019. So we're only 5 years and we're seeing positive signs, like I said, on all species.
Mike says almost immediately after their removal, salmon swam past the first of the 2 former dam sites. Then, with help from the tribe's fish hatchery program, they saw significant population rebounds the following years. But those accomplishments didn't come without criticism.
One of the criticisms I hear about Elwha is that the Chinook population hasn't got to the upper headwaters in significant numbers. And that's true, and I think the reason is we've lost that native gene.
Adult salmon generally lay eggs in the same spot or slightly upriver from where they were born or planted by humans. It's one of the amazing facts about the fish, but because salmon have not laid eggs upriver of the second dam for over 100 years, Mike says it's going to take some time for the salmon to discover the new spawning waters.
Dams have been in for almost 100 years. Will it take another 100 years to recover?
You know, our recovery is projected at 20 to 30 years. That said, I don't think we can necessarily wave our wand and go back to pre-contact fish populations.
Back on the Klamath River, something amazing and a bit unexpected is happening.
Spawned out female. Fall Run Chinook, Jenny Creek, right here.
Just weeks after the final dam was removed on the Klamath River, the salmon arrived.
No, these are all repopulating fish from downstream.
Morgan Koneckley is a biologist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, or CDFW, and he's been closely monitoring the exciting developments. In October and November, he and his team started counting salmon that managed to navigate through the sediment-filled waters of the Klamath River, and then these salmon made it all the way up to Jenny Creek, a tributary above the newly demolished Iron Gate Dam, where they now have started laying eggs.
We've seen over 250 fish swimming and returning back to this creek already since counting started. We'll have, be able to put that in context in future years, but right now we're coming from zero, right? So 0 to 250, yeah, this is great.
That's 250 fish counted in just one of dozens of creeks and tributaries along the Klamath River. Also, about 100 miles north of the newly demolished dams, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service captured this video of salmon making their way up to the Keno Dam in Oregon. This dam and another one were left intact because they had fish ladders to help the salmon pass through. Despite video evidence, rumors spread on social media claiming that CDFW was planting these adult salmon in the river.
Have you planted any fish?
No, they made it on their own. We did not plant these fish.
Eric Jones helps manage the newly renovated Fall Creek hatchery, which counts fish above the demolished dam. He says not only did the adult Chinook salmon swim up here naturally, but so did the threatened species of salmon known as the coho salmon.
We did not rear any young of the year coho at this facility. They basically found their way up here.
To boost the salmon population, CDFW will be temporarily releasing baby salmon from the hatchery into the Klamath River for about the next 8 years.
Hopefully after this 8-year period, the fish will be able to repopulate the main stem and all the tributaries on their own.
As restoration on the Klamath River continues, the rest of the nation will be looking at the Klamath as a model for future dam removal projects.
I mean, I'd love to see this ecosystem the way it was 500 years ago. And I mean, if we do it right, we can move in that direction.
American Rivers, a nonprofit that tracks dam removal trends, estimates that 30,000 aging dams should be removed across the nation by 2050.
We have a lot of restoration, but the healing has to begin. The healing of the people, our communities that have been devastated by these dams.
Dam removal will soon affect everyone, and it'll require everyone to pay close attention. From the Klamath River, the world's largest dam removal project, I'm John Bartel.